Alright, this video is just going to go a little bit more in depth with the theorems from lesson 2.4. The first one is the complement same theorem. So this is how we abbreviate it, comp same theorem, or you could write it out if that's easier and makes more sense. So the theorem states that if angles are complementary to the same angle, so there's that comp same, then they are congruent. So one little note to have with any of these theorems that are the same, that's going to apply to examples that have three angles. Alright, so let me draw a picture of what this could possibly look like. Alright, so these videos are going to be a little bit sloppier than normal just because I'm writing all this with my finger, which is harder to do than it seems. Alright, so what the theorem tells us is that if angles are complementary to the same angle, so you would have to be given that information. You'd be given that angle 1 is complementary to angle 2. So we're saying that angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary, and you would also be told that angle 3 is complementary to angle 2. So if you look at here's angle 3, complementary to angle 2. So you got angles 1 and 3 that are complementary to the same angle 2. When that happens, you can conclude that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. And when you see a visual picture, you can kind of see that these look like they're going to be the same angle. Nothing we can assume, but because we're told this information about them being complementary to angle 2, we can deduce that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So let me just throw in some numbers here to have it make a little bit more sense. Let's say that angle 2 is 30 degrees. Well, if we're told that angle 1 is complementary to angle 2 is 30 degrees, that means that angle 1 must be 60 degrees, because these two angles have to add up to 90. Well, we're also told that angle 3 is complementary to angle 2. So these right here are complementary, and again, if angle 2 is 30 degrees, that means that angle 3 must be 60 degrees, so that they add up to 90. And when we throw in numbers, you can see that angle 1 is 60 and angle 3 is 60, therefore angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. Alright, so same idea applies to the supplement same theorem, only in this case the angles will add up to 180 versus 90. But if angles are supplementary to the same angle, then they are congruent. Let's make that side note again that if they're supplementary to the same angle, these examples will be using three angles. Alright, so I'm going to draw the angles in. Alright, so there you have some sloppy angles 1, 2, and 3. And you would need to be told this information if angles are supplementary to the same angle. So you would be given some information about them being supplementary. So just like that, you'd be given some information. Angle 1 is supplementary to angle 2, and angle 3 is supplementary to angle 2. So you can see in the picture that kind of makes sense. Here's angle 1 and angle 2, adding up to 180 degrees, just kind of by sight. And then angle 2 and angle 3 looks like if you were to put them next to each other, they would add up to 180 and be supplementary. So if two angles, angle 1 and angle 3, are supplementary to the same angle, angle 2, we can conclude that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. Now let's look at that with some numbers. Let's say angle 1 is 100. Actually, I'm not going to start with that. Let's say that angle 2 is 60 degrees. Well, if we're given the information that angle 1 is supplementary to angle 2, that means that angle 1 must be 120 degrees, because 120 plus 60 is 180. Alright, so then we're also told that angle 3 is supplementary to angle 2. So here's angle 3, supplementary with angle 2. Well, angle 2 is 60, which means angle 3 must be 120 for those to be supplementary. And now you can see angle 1 and angle 3 are both 120 degrees, congruent. All right, our third theorem is the complement congruent theorem. So instead of having the word same, the change is that these have the word congruent. When this happens, just a side note, these examples will be using 4 angles. And the theorem states if angles are complementary to congruent angles, then they are congruent. By the way, this congruent angles, you'll have to be given that information. Okay, you'll have to be given a set of congruent angles to use this theorem. So let me draw a picture. All right, so here's what this could possibly look like. And there's different ways to draw it, but this is just one example. We've got all these angles, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're given some information. We're told that angle 1 is complementary to angle 2. So here's angle 1 and 2. You can see, looks like if you add those up, they would equal 90 degrees. We're also told that angle 3 is complementary to angle 4. So here's angle 3 complementary to angle 4. So you've got 2 sets of complementary angles. And the third thing you have to be told is that one of those pairs is congruent. So we're told that angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. So here's angle 1. I'm going to go ahead and mark the congruency is congruent to angle 4. All right, so what can you conclude? The theorem tells us that if angles are complementary to congruent angles, then those angles will be congruent. So let's look at this picture. Angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary. Angle 3 and angle 4 are complementary. So, and also angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. So if I kind of look at all this that is written out, angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. That means that the other 2 angles, angle 2, will be congruent to angle 3. And let me show you this with some numbers to kind of make sense. So first we're told that angle 1 and angle 4 are congruent. So I'll go ahead and say that angle 1 is 60 and angle 4 is 60. Those are congruent angles. Then let's look at the other given. Angle 1 is complementary to angle 2. So if angle 1 is 60, angle 2 must be 30. Angle 3 is complementary to angle 4. Well, angle 4 is 60, so angle 3 must be 30. Then you can state that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. And you can see angle 2 and 3 are both 30 degrees right there. All right, last theorem, our supplement congruent theorem. Again, just like the complement, if it's one of these 4 theorems that uses congruent angles, you're going to be working with an example that has 4 angles. So the theorem states that if angles are supplementary to congruent angles, then they are congruent. So let me draw a picture of what this could look like. All right, so here's a picture. We're given the information angle 1 is supplementary to angle 2. Angle 3 is supplementary to angle 4. Then we're also told that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. Now again, this theorem that is like supplement congruent theorem or complement congruent theorem has to give you a pair of congruent angles. So here's angle 1 congruent to angle 3. So what that tells us is that the other 2 angles, angle 2 and angle 4, will be congruent to each other. So angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. And then let me just throw some numbers in there to have that make a little bit more sense. I'm going to start with, we know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So let's say that's, I don't know, 130 degrees and 130 degrees. So we have our congruent angles from the given. Now if angle 1 is supplementary to angle 2, that means that angle 2 must be 50 degrees because those have to add up to 180. And then if angle 3 is supplementary to angle 4, that means that angle 4 must be 50 degrees because angle 3 is 130 and that adds up to 180. And so you can see right there that angle 2 and angle 4 are both 50 degrees or congruent angles. And that's how that theorem works.